Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah Stories. Today's story begins with a quiet girl, a mysterious dinner invitation, and a moment that changes everything. Let's step into her world. Golden afternoon light poured in through the small third-floor apartment window, bathing the old bookshelf and the half-finished teacup on the table. A soft jazz tune drifted from the vintage radio by the stove. Elena Parker sat curled in her wool-upholstered armchair, highlighting sections of her management textbook when her phone rang. She eyed the unknown number, hesitated, then picked up. A woman's voice came through, polite yet warmly formal. "Hello, Ms. Parker. I'm calling from the Midnight Mystery Dinner Program. You've just been selected as a special guest for this Friday evening's event at Leora Restaurant." Elena straightened in her seat, frowning slightly. "I'm sorry, I don't recall signing up for anything." "That's correct. Your name was submitted by a friend, Rachel Young. She said you were someone in need of a truly special evening." Elena let out a breath, lips tightening. Rachel, of course it was her. Since Elena broke up 4 years ago, Rachel had been tirelessly trying to pull her out of what she called the safe but sad zone. "I'm not sure I'm really cut out for this kind of thing." "Ms. Parker, this is a one-time event. No phones, no press, no expectations. Just a private dinner with a carefully chosen guest." Elena looked around her apartment. Bills, textbooks, quiet solitude. At 35, working part-time at the library and attending grad school at night, life had become a rhythm of stillness and survival. "All right," she said softly. "What do I need to do?" Friday evening arrived faster than Elena expected. She stood in front of her wardrobe, staring at the familiar clothes, as if hoping something would magically stand out. In the end, she chose a simple navy blue dress. Nothing too fancy, but elegant enough for an upscale restaurant. When the taxi dropped her off in front of Leora, golden light spilled from the tall windows of the historic building. Elena clutched her purse, inhaled deeply. It was just dinner. Nothing more, nothing less. A tall, composed hostess greeted her and led her through a private hallway. "Your room is ready," the woman said with a knowing smile before opening a door marked Private Dining. The room was small, intimate, and breathtaking. Candlelight flickered along the edges of wooden shelves. A large window looked out over the Charles River, shimmering with city reflections. At the center of the room, one table for two, and a man who rose to his feet as she entered. He was tall, lean, with soft dark brown hair and intelligent eyes that seemed quietly observant. He wore a simple gray shirt, dark trousers, no watch, no flashy accessories, nothing ostentatious, yet he looked effortlessly put together. "Hello," he said, voice low and warm. "Hi," Elena replied, unsure whether to smile or apologize for being exactly on time. "No names," the hostess reminded gently, then closed the door behind her. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Elena sat down carefully, suddenly feeling like she'd stepped into a play without knowing the lines. "So, I guess we're having dinner together," she offered. "That's the idea," he said with a quiet laugh. "I don't usually do things like this." "My friend signed me up without asking," she admitted. "Sounds like an interesting friend. She thinks my life needs more color." "Is she right?" he asked, lifting a glass of wine the server had just brought. Elena hesitated, then clinked her glass to his. "Maybe, but probably not in this way." They toasted, and the conversation began. No awkward pauses, no pretension, just two strangers in a room filled with candlelight, letting time slow down. And something soft, something unfamiliar, quietly stirred inside Elena's heart. That night lingered in her mind long after the candles burned low. Saturday morning, Elena made herself a cup of coffee and promised to leave the previous night behind, but her mind kept drifting to his eyes, the way he listened, the strange stillness they had shared. The library opened at 9, and as usual, she arrived early to prep the reading room. While she was reshelving a stack of antique books, the front bell rang. A delivery man stepped in, holding a neatly wrapped brown paper package with no return address. "Elena Parker?" he asked. "That's me." She signed for it, puzzled. No one ever sent her anything. She peeled back the wrapping, revealing a worn, leather-bound book, an original edition of Little Women, the very book she'd once called her childhood favorite. Her heart gave a small, startled tug. Inside the cover was a cream-colored note, handwritten in neat, slanted script. For the woman who reminded me that silence can sometimes be the most valuable thing. Elena was speechless. She remembered saying it in passing during their talk about childhood reads. She hadn't lingered on it. But he had remembered. Less than an hour later, the bell above the door rang again. Elena looked up, half expecting another delivery, but her breath caught in her throat. It was him. Nathan stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee and a quiet smile. In the daylight, he looked more casual, but his eyes were just as steady. "Hope you don't mind the surprise visit," he said. Elena shook her head gently, her heart thudding for reasons she couldn't quite name. "I thought, maybe next time, if you're willing, we could skip the mystery part," he added, "and call each other by name." The next 2 weeks passed as if they existed in a timeline of their own. Nathan became a quiet presence in Elena's days, sometimes a morning coffee left on her desk, sometimes a rare book waiting for her to discover. He never made a fuss, just made everything feel easy. They walked along the river after work, visited tucked-away cafes only locals knew about, and talked for hours about things that seemed small on the surface. Books that had once made them cry, forgotten childhood memories, quiet dreams they'd never voiced aloud. Elena felt herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. For the first time, she wasn't trying to impress anyone. With Nathan, it felt real, or at least it seemed to. Still, there were things that nudged at her. Nathan never talked about his job. He dodged questions about where he lived, who his friends were, or what his schedule looked like. His phone was always on silent, and he never answered calls in front of her. One afternoon, over lunch with Rachel at a small cafe near the library, Elena mentioned it offhand. Rachel paused, frowning as she set down her spoon. "You haven't Googled him." Elena shook her head. "I don't want to ruin the magic. I want to trust him." Rachel studied her for a long moment. "I get it. But men have secrets, Elena, and sometimes those secrets are huge." That night, Elena opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered for a second before typing the name, Nathan Hale. Within seconds, the screen filled with results. CEO of Hale Tech, a leading tech conglomerate in AI education. A notoriously private billionaire, rarely seen in public. Article after article described meteoric success, an enigmatic public image, and an impenetrable personal life. Elena leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. Nathan wasn't just the man she was beginning to care for. He was one of the most powerful, wealthiest men in the country, and he hadn't told her a word of it. That Thursday morning, Elena woke to the relentless buzzing of her phone. Still groggy, she blinked at the screen. Dozens of missed calls and messages, from Rachel, coworkers, even unknown numbers. One text stood out. "Turn on your computer, now. Rachel." With a sinking feeling, Elena opened her laptop. Seconds later, a bold headline filled the homepage. Tech billionaire Nathan Hale spotted with mystery woman at Boston Cafe. Beneath it, a photo, Nathan leaning in to speak to her, Elena laughing softly. All the blood drained from her face. Less than 24 hours after she'd Googled him, the world had found them. Before she could gather her thoughts, her phone rang. It was Nathan. "Elena?" His voice was tight. "I saw it. Are you okay?" "Reporters are calling me," she whispered, pulling the curtain shut as a camera lens peeked from across the street. "They know where I work, where I study. They know everything. Don't speak to anyone. Don't answer the door. I'm sending a car. Pack a bag for a few days. We're leaving the city tonight, instead of the weekend." "But what about my job?" "Elena, please. I need you safe. You deserve to hear everything. From me, not from the headlines." 30 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the library. The driver, a sharply dressed woman, stepped out and opened the door. "Mr. Hale is waiting at the private marina," she said. "We'll take you there directly." Elena nodded, heart racing. Everything felt surreal. Yesterday, she'd been an ordinary woman with quiet dreams. Today, she was part of a world she didn't recognize, full of cameras, headlines, and guarded secrets. When the car reached the dock, Nathan was waiting. He looked casual, but the fatigue in his eyes was undeniable, and so was the relief when he saw her. "Thank you for coming," he said, reaching for her hand. Elena looked into his eyes. "Now, tell me everything." At the quiet dock, Nathan reached out to help Elena onto the sailboat. Long, graceful, nothing like the flashy yacht she'd imagined. It was simple, ivory white, with the name Solace etched discreetly near the bow. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. The sea lapped gently against the hull, and the rigging clicked softly in the breeze. Nathan worked the sails in silence, his hair tousled by the wind. Elena sat along the edge, her eyes fixed on the pale line of the horizon. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "I just wanted one moment to be myself without guarding every word." Elena turned to face him, his eyes weary, honest, and quietly lonely. She didn't answer. Part of her understood. The other part wasn't ready to forgive. Elena returned to the city late Sunday afternoon. Nathan had arranged a car to take her home. No pressure, no explanations. "I'll wait," he said softly before the door closed. She nodded, saying nothing. The days that followed were a blur. The media storm didn't stop. Outside the library, paparazzi waited. Strangers looked at her like a soap opera character. She requested time off, went home, drew the curtains, turned off her phone, and shut out the world. Nathan didn't call, and somehow that silence felt louder than all the noise outside. One evening, Rachel stopped by with takeout and a pile of tabloids. "Please don't tell me you're actually reading those," Elena sighed, sinking to the floor. "I'm pre-screening for you," Rachel teased. "But you miss him, don't you?" Elena said nothing. She stared out the window, where the streetlight shimmered faintly against the glass. "I miss the man who brought coffee to the library and listened to me talk about old books. That man in the headlines? I don't know if they're the same." Monday morning, Elena returned to the library. The curious glances lingered, but most of the media had moved on to the next sensational story. She tried to focus, restocking new arrivals, tidying the displays that had been disrupted during her days away. The door chime rang. Elena didn't look up, responding automatically. "Welcome to the Reading Lantern. Let me know if I can help you find anything." "Actually, I'm looking for something very specific." The voice froze her in place. Elena looked up. Nathan was standing there, not in a suit, not with security, just him, in a pale blue button-down and well-worn jeans. In his hands was a small package wrapped in craft paper, and a cautious, hopeful look. "I've missed you," he said, "every day." She said nothing, just looked at him, same eyes, not perfect but honest. "I've stepped back from the company," he continued. "I'm trying to find a better balance in my life. And, if you're willing, I'd like to rebuild something with you." Elena didn't give Nathan an answer that day. After their reunion at the library, they began to see each other again, slowly, carefully. Sometimes it was a quick coffee after work, other times a quiet walk along the river, as if they were learning how to hear each other from the beginning. There were no more flashing cameras, no pressure to perform, just Nathan with eyes that still listened, and Elena with a heart still hesitant but no longer closed. A few weeks later, on a softly raining evening, they sat in a cozy cafe, surrounded by the scent of toasted bread and warm lamplight. Nathan looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You once said you dreamed of taking a cross-country train, just to watch the world go by. What if we did that together?" Elena froze. She hadn't thought of that dream in so long. Something small, yet always out of reach. She nodded, not because of who Nathan was, but because he remembered a single sentence she'd spoken in passing. On the long train from east to west, they shared a private compartment with wide windows. Nathan brought a novel she'd once recommended, and Elena carried a notebook filled with things she'd never said. The train rolled steadily through low hills and endless golden fields. In their private compartment, Elena sat by the window, soft sunlight spilling across her sleeve. Nathan sat across from her, a half-open novel in his hands, but his gaze was on her, not the page. They'd been on the train for 3 days. No schedules, no calls, no press. Just the sound of tracks, shifting scenery, and conversations that stretched into hours. On the third afternoon, as the train passed through a nearly forgotten town, Nathan closed his book and said, "When I was a kid, I lost both my parents in an accident. After that, I lived with my brother, stronger, smarter, never allowed himself to be vulnerable." His voice was calm, not dramatic, but Elena heard the loneliness in every word. "I became good at building things, companies, strategies, a persona, but I'm terrible at letting people see who I really am." Elena looked at him for a long time, and for the first time, she truly saw him. Not a CEO or a billionaire, but a man who had once lost everything and learned to hide behind success. Someone more like her than she'd imagined. As sunset glowed through the window, Nathan pulled out a folder and laid it gently between them. "I'm expanding a fund to bring books to small towns, but I don't want to just fund it. I want to build it with you. Not because I love you, but because you understand it better than anyone." Elena read through the pages and saw herself in every line. "I'll do it," she said with a smile, "as long as I still get to work at the library on weekends." "I promise," Nathan whispered, "as long as it makes you happy." After the cross-country train journey, everything became a little clearer. Nathan and Elena didn't return with grand declarations or dramatic promises. Instead, they took slow, steady steps, working side by side on the mobile library initiative, meeting with local communities, organizing book shipments, designing reading lists for children. They learned to listen not just in love, but in collaboration. The differences that once made Elena uneasy now felt like balance. Nathan saw the big picture, she understood the people. Together, they built something that mattered. 6 months later, Elena stepped once again into the cozy private room at Lyora, the same place where it all began with a quiet dinner beneath candlelight. But this time, she wasn't a woman haunted by her past. She was someone rewriting her future. The room was just as she remembered, soft flickering candles, a window overlooking the glittering city lights. On the table, instead of a mystery menu, was a bouquet of wildflowers and a handwritten note from Nathan, "Where everything began and where I want it to continue." Nathan entered a few minutes later, dressed simply in a white shirt, his face calm, radiant with quiet joy. "Ready?" he asked with a smile. Elena nodded. "This time, I have no doubts." After a simple dinner, Nathan pulled out a small velvet box and gently placed it in her palm. "I can't promise a perfect life," he said softly, "but I promise to always be the man you once trusted, the one who brought you coffee at the library and listened to your smallest stories. Will you marry me, Elena?" She didn't hesitate. She smiled, eyes glistening, hand tightening around his. "Yes," she whispered, "because real love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be honest." The wedding took place a month later on a small sailboat anchored quietly in the bay. Calm waters, a gentle breeze, and a world far from headlines. No press, no flashes, just a circle of close friends, a modest dinner, and laughter that came from the heart. Rachel stood proudly as maid of honor, glowing in her soft green dress, declaring herself the most successful matchmaker of the century. "If it weren't for me, you'd still be color-coding books at the library," she teased, whispering in Elena's ear just before the ceremony began. Elena laughed, then turned to look at Nathan waiting at the end of the deck, his hair golden in the light of the setting sun. When they exchanged vows, there were no mentions of wealth or fame, just the truths that mattered most: trust, presence, and the promise to walk forward together. As the ceremony ended, Elena looked around. Candles, sea breeze, familiar faces, and a man who was once a mystery, now home. Not because of who he was, but because in a world that never stopped watching, he saw only her and loved her in all the quiet ways that mattered most. Thanks for joining us on this quiet, beautiful journey. If it made you smile, even just a little, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. And let us know what's the one moment that changed everything for you.